Ah, Smart Water Alkaline with antioxidant.
Whoa, that's refreshing.
And a 9.5 plus pH for every way you move.
I did take a Spain class today.
Restoring like a pro. Smart Water Alkaline with antioxidant. For those with a taste for taste. Grab yours today.
Netflix has a new, monstrous story to tell. In 1950s Wisconsin, Ed Gein lived quietly on a decaying farm, hiding a house of horrors so gruesome it would redefine the American nightmare. Driven by isolation, psychosis, and an all-consuming obsession with his mother, he committed crimes that would haunt Hollywood for decades. The third and most harrowing installment of Ryan Murphy and Ian Brennan's anthology series. Watch Monster, the Ed Gein story, streaming now only on Netflix.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
You're listening to the Super Rugby Cymru podcast.
Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the SRC podcast. Joining me, Big M, as always, the one and only Double R, Mr. Rob Rees. Good evening, my friend. How are we?
All good, mate. All good. There's just the two of us this week. One of us is sloping off.
I know, just the two of us. Unfortunately, the man we recently discovered that was a bookie, also we call him Bookie, is decided he's going to go spend some time in Portugal this week. Can't remember why he said. I'm sure there was something funny he said about it. I'm sure he said something.
John? Funny?
Probably said Aberafan we're going to win or something. I don't know. You know what he's like. Okay, so let's get cracking. And unfortunately, John is not here to discuss an Aberafan win. So, TV game Thursday night, Bridgend versus Aberafan. Now, I was unfortunate enough that I had to deal with some in-laws, so I didn't exactly get to watch it live, and I've been quite lazy, if I'm going to be honest, so I haven't seen it, barring the highlights. So, Mr. Rees, can you give us a little rundown of the game? So, tight finish, very, very close ending.
Yeah, again, another fantastic example. 3 great games now we've had on TV this season. And this one was very yo-yo, more so than the Cardiff Quins game. That game sort of felt Cardiff were going to win it until they didn't. This one was back and forth. Both sides' defence coaches going to be pulling hair out, but they were building nicely, getting over the ball quick. And, you know, the distribution rates, the 3-second or less rucks were numerous in this sort of game. And what was good to see is the momentum was swinging. You could just see each side was having 10 minutes with the ball. And it was about the hour mark, and I was sitting there trying to sort of work out where the momentum was at that point, which was with Bridgend. I was sort of thinking, do Aberafan get the momentum back here? You know, as a young side, I think they're 22 years of age. Is it the average age in Aberafan squads? Jason Iyer said this season, and it's one of those. You think, are they going to wrestle it back? They didn't really seem to do much to wrestle it back. Then out of nowhere, probably with about 70 meters to go, win a couple of penalties around the scrum and make some territorial gains, kick upfield. And an absolute pearler of a line from Joe Gage right down the centre of the park, ultimately wins the game for Aberafan, and it's great to see that both sides went out to attack. Yeah, I don't think they got bogged down too much in slowing it down and having a forward oriented game. I thought that suited Bridgend more on paper before the game. But the way Aberafan are developing this squad, I think they've moved away perhaps now with, Rowan Jenkins moving away. Luke Davis is a very dynamic front rower. Jordan Rogers, people like that. They're all very, very good at what they do. And that's a sort of a mobile pack. And I'm not saying that they've decreased the efficiency around set piece and what your forward should be good at, but it ultimately gave us a very good product. And yeah, I think there'd be a few sort of sigh of relief on Abravan's end and a few disappointed faces on Bridgend. But again, that's, if you noticed, for those who watched the game, around 45 to say 60 minutes, that quarter of an hour against Ebervale, I think it was it 10 penalties in 13 minutes or something like that. I think I posted it on the night. And they did exactly the same. There was over 10 penalties in that 15-minute period, and it killed them. That was it. That was the momentum switching back into Aberafan, where Bridgend then grabbed it at the end. But you just feel that at the moment, Bridgend aren't controlling the games as well as they as definitely as they want to, but as they probably should be doing as well.
Yeah, so I don't know if you can help me out with this one then. So Aberafan outscored Bridgend 6 tries to 5. They brought in Keelan Cullen over the summer, who I was under the impression he was sort of a 90% goal kicker. Was it just a case of there was a lot of corner tries, or what were the conditions like? Should that be a concern? I mean, they're bringing him in as a point scorer, and if I just grab it up a year, they slotted 2 conversions of the 6, and Cullen only grabbed one of them.
Yeah, well, he's dropped. I think he was on. Was he on 90% or best part of 90% after round 2? He's down to 64% at the moment. That sounds like an absolute catastrophic fall away. In reality, it's probably not as bad because the amount of kicks at this stage of the season. I think there was a few that you think, oh, there, fair enough. And there was a few easy ones he missed. There was a few not right under the post, old penalty try sort of conversions, but the ones you'd expect any sort of SRC fly half to nail 99% of the time, especially given the conditions didn't seem too bad. It was slick ball and, underfoot, you had that sort of that dewiness, but it didn't appear to be too much of a wind. So you'd be disappointed with that. And I'll sort of get to other kickers that are top 5 point scorers this week later on in the podcast that again have absolutely plummeted on their percentage accuracy across round 3 as well, so it seems a bit of a pattern.
Yeah, well, it is still early days. I'm just thinking, considering that everyone I spoke to over the summer was like, oh, he's this amazing goal kicker or whatever. But everyone has off days, and early round it does skew the percentages so badly. In terms of Bridgend, I did manage to catch up with Scott Baldwin, but these 3 games last season, obviously this 3 slightly different results, but they took 7 league points from them, and they've taken 7 league points from this 3 again this season. And obviously seems to be a lot more work-ons, especially as it is early season. So should Bridgend be a bit concerned with the sheer amount of penalties and the opportunities and tries they're sort of given away?
Yeah, I think they'd be probably. You look at the top focuses of Scott Baldwin, like you said, 7 points sounds. I think that's not too bad, but you beat the Quinn side, who we have found out since are a very, very good side, sit 3rd in the table, massive win. You've got 3 home games. The Ebervale game, in reality, you're probably thinking, let's stick within the 7. Let's truck and trailer with them. Let's hang behind them, and if we get an opportunity, we can take it. They didn't get the opportunity, and again, they lost, significantly in the end of that one. But then this game, again, at home, you're sort of feeling they need to get the momentum going. They had it in the palm of their hands at time. It wasn't a comfortable lead, but they were holding the game, and you think, right, can you kick on? And I think Scott Baldwin will be saying a couple of things. Field position, for starters. You can't control a game if you're in your own 22 1 minute, 3 minutes later you're in their 22, then they're back. That you can't control a game. Exits are key, and I think they're struggling on exits, and maybe that's a case of they're either overplaying it at the moment or the kicking strategy's not quite paying off. The discipline is going to be key, as we said. When you come out in that 3rd quarter of the game, you cannot be conceding 25 penalties in that quarter alone over the last 2 games at home as well. So it's a momentum killer, which I've already said. The momentum, it allows easy exits for your opponents or easy advances into your own red zone, and that's where points quickly accumulate. And sides, they've played three sides that I would classify as having probably very very strong, exceptionally strong packs, especially around the set piece. So they'd be wanting to tidy a few things up there, and from especially on the territorial kicking game and the exits, if they can get those sort of right and just calm the discipline down, you just start controlling the game. You hold on to the ball then for 20 minutes instead of 10 minutes. Therefore, you're more likely to score extra points, build a lead, and just run from there. I think defensively, Aberravon did this a bit last year. They were missing a lot of one-up tackles or, sort of two men going in and in that middle of the park. And you saw that a lot on Thursday from Aberravon and Bridgend. And that's, again, another theme that I've noticed with Bridgend. They did it against Quins. They were defending extremely narrowly. Whether that was to try and nullify that sort of big pack threat, they sort of did it against Ebervale as well. And you're leaving gaps, you're leaving edges, and if you're not filling those, or you're not using your sweeper and playing a back three that's sort of pivoting off the full back, then what you're ultimately doing is your defence is having to shift round so quickly and move that extra man out, because ultimately they're getting that extra carry, that extra pass quickly out because they got the numbers. So you're having to recover, and then if you're not making your one-up tackles, you're going through, you're either scoring or you're making that big gain of yardage through the middle of the park. You're getting your clean break, your defender's beaten, and then it is a scramble defence, which is where your this ill discipline comes. So we're coming back around, and you can see how this all sort of fits in. The penalties that get given away is either 3 points or kick to the corner, and we all know how difficult the Maul can be to stop these days.
Yeah. So speaking on that, obviously Aberravon, it was in 6 tries, like I've already said. It was a nice even split, so 3 from the pack, 3 from the backs. So it seems that they are trying more of that all-round gameplay, which is nice. Obviously, 37-35, not exactly comfortable, but you're happy with the win. 28-24 against Newport, and then the loss at Ebervale. They're looking good. Fair play to them. They've really come out of the box, and obviously, conceding the amount of points they are will be a concern, but they kind of at the minute, you score 4 tries, we score 5, and they're kind of doing it at the minute, but it's not going to last, obviously. So I'm wondering what's more to come, because I thought, Aberravon, they're going to move on this year. They're all a year older, they're all a year more wiser, but now the squad age has dropped, and there's a few new boys coming in, and it's like, well, is this going to be the rotation with them? Is it always going to be like maybe 5 boys sort of moving in and out of the squad every year, keeping that age low, so they never really fully hit where they could be if they stayed together as a group? I mean, that's my main concern looking at Aberravon going forward. Obviously, this is a development league and there is an aspect to it, but surely you want to be getting some of those hard edges, making those game management decisions, especially as your captain, maybe a couple of good hard forwards would really make massive differences.
Yeah, I think they're gonna. It shows that they've kicked on. I think Jason and a few a few people have said around that Ebervale performance to kick off that they were poor and that they were disappointed. But let's be honest and let's look at results, and we'll cover another one that Ebervale have had at their own place. They're the Challenger Shield holders for a reason, double finalists from last year. Realistically, not many teams at all are coming with anything from them. No one's come away from there with a win. So you're leaving that game, first game of the season, as you say, with a sort of a young squad, a few weapons missing in the back line at the sort of that sort of stage as well. They've gone away. They've beaten Newport at home. They've sort of backed that up with a game that I think that they should have expected to win. So I think at this stage, I think realistically, we would have looked at Aberravon winning 1, losing 2, and probably have sit in 7, maybe 8 points. It's probably around the 7 points, in all honesty. They would have wanted to take 5 from Bridgend and 1 from Ebervale and Newport. In trying to be fair. They've gone 2 wins and 1 loss and 9 points. They sit 4th in the table. And like I said, they're looking good. You got people like Corey Lewis-Jenkins is coming back in. Joe Gage looks fantastic at the moment. Scott Del Nevo has been an absolute star at fullback from since he came in last season. And I think it's a surprise to some people that he's only had that one senior year at Aberafon last year. He's under 20s, etc. Then you've got people like Ashton Evans up front have picked up the torch where people like Andrew Waite left it behind. People like Rowan Jenkins have left from up front. Shea Smallman, I thought, had a great game on Thursday night. It's those experienced heads up front that you've got to step up, not just physically, but give that performance that pulls everyone up with it and gives a bit of confidence to those youngsters coming through. And I'll be honest, I think Aberafon are going to be a tough team to beat this year because now they've got that confidence, they've got the belief, and they've got the results. I think they'll build off it.
Definitely some early stage dark horses seeming to be appearing. So that was our Thursday night game. On to the Saturday now, and we travel very, very far west to Carmarthen Park, where Pontypool were the visitors against a very buoyant Quinn side after their TV win down at the Arms Park. And they really backed it up, especially in the first 40 minutes, 24-0 at half-time. 2 of those tries came from Reece Fawcett, the loose-head prop, powering over the line. Not something you generally associate with Pontypool conceding too many of. Obviously, half-time came, heavens opened, and it finished 24-12. But I think it was either 24-7 or 24-5, like well into the red. So, Pontypool score with our very last play of the game to make it 24-12. So, very happy personally for Quinn City picking up the win. I'm really, really impressed with what I've been seeing so far this season. Little bit concerned with that pointless second half. I mean, even though the heavens did open, weather can make impacts like that, but you'd think having that sort of momentum, that sort of gap, 4 scores, you'd think they'd bag that 4th try. That's probably my only concern. They've only picked up the try bonus point against Cardiff and that game was just so wide open. I think honestly every team in the league would have picked up at least 4 tries in that game. On to Pontypool though, seems to be quite concerning times.
Definitely, I think we touched on it with the RGC loss at home. I mean, Pontypool didn't lose to anybody at home last year. So straight away, that was, warning signs. We didn't really know where Swansea were, and they didn't comfortably beat Swansea the week before. So that was sort of, okay, they haven't impressed us. And I'll be honest, yet again, it's been, whilst Carmarthen Quins are looking good here, let's not kid ourselves, 2 wins from 3, 3rd in the table with 10 points. It is a concern for Pontypool. I mean, for a side that has got a gooder side, forget the history and what they've done years ago and the history they've got, etc. They've got a good side now. But what we're seeing people like Morgan Lloyd play well. I thought Carrick McDonough's come back to the league. He went to fullback. You thought he did well, but he didn't have enough touches of the ball. Again, Morgan Allen's gone strong and they've done well over the ball, but they're lacking that front row. They haven't really signed anybody in the front row of experience and notes. They've brought in a few youngsters and the usual experienced heads are also struggling, I'll be honest, at the moment. Quins have taken a strong pack, have dominated the set piece, a bit like RGC did a week prior. They've ground out a lovely start, and I think the only thing that Quins will be disappointed in from this, and this is where Pontypool will be looking to sort of dig their positives from, is the fact they've held Quins out at Quins for 40 minutes with no points, got 12 of their own. But yeah, deeply concerning for Pontypool. But for Carmarthen, I mean, if you're Steph Thomas and the rest of that coaching team, you're looking at that going, boys, this is fantastic. We've beaten Cardiff, we've beaten Pontypool. Again, they probably would have said 1 win out of 3. And ironically, they've lost that game, the Bridgend game. It's probably the only game they would have said, realistically, deep down, heart of hearts, they're going to win. They are looking good. They're finishing teams off, and that's the only disappointment, is that they didn't kick on. And that's where you see a top side from just a good side is, if Pontypool had an off 40 minutes, which I don't think it was an off 40 minutes to that extent, it was just a wild 40. But if you've got to take advantage of that, you're 24-0 up, you've got to close it out. Doesn't matter whether you win 29-12. It's not about scoring 40, 50 points and nilling Pontypool or keeping them without a try, etc. But you've got to kick on and claim that bonus point. And ultimately, with 24-point gap, you've got to be looking at all 6 points as well. So I think that's a disappointing thing for Quins at the moment. But again, a relatively young side. Was it 6 or 7 Scarlets? But again, a lot of those are not your seasoned professionals. They are your younger players. And you can see how it's complementing them nicely with players like Lewis Millen, Sean Evans and Steph Evans and people like that. They're really coming together nicely as a unit. And like you said, this is a polar opposites. One team is going to be maybe not elated, but really happy with their sitting not only in this game, but over the league. And one who's sitting rock bottom. And I said it before the season started, and I've said every week since, I'm not convinced, aside from Joe Davis, and I will say I think Carrick McDonough has come in since. I've just not been impressed by Pontypool's recruitment over the summer. I think it's hurting them, knowing that they were losing lots of players to the Dragons who were academy allocations, who are not going to be playing this year. Hugh Anderson, Sam Scarf, Dylan Kelleher-Jones, Griffiths, sorry. It's too many Welsh names. I started thinking of Ryan Jones's name. But you can see what I mean. All these different players moved on last year. Morgan Lloyd is the only one who's sort of come back out of that core group of those who were sort of bridging into the Dragons. And they just haven't replaced those with any sort of real quality, if I'm being honest. Joel Mahoney had a poor game as well, which is rare for him. They blew a couple of 2v1s out wide, and all of a sudden, that's the difference. That's actually closing the gap. That's not allowing Carmarthen to go 24-0 up. They're throwing miracle passes. And that probably sums Pontypool up, is because they're not having the platform, they're having to throw these miracle passes. They're having less of these chances. So it's not ingrained on the mind. It's not naturally intrinsic to the players to be doing these sort of things. So when they get in those scenarios, they haven't imagined it. They haven't been doing it regularly. So they are going wrong. And like I said, bottom of the table with 4 points and just 1 win is really bad for Pontypool.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see how the return fixture goes, and we will get onto that a bit later. But the one thing that is seeming to stand out for the Quins this season is their back row. And, I kind of want to include Tom Phillips in that, because even though he is, wearing a 4 shirt, he is a blindside by trade. And they have just been absolutely dominant everywhere. Lewis Millen, the new incoming captain, Sean Evans, Ben Williams, from the Scarlets, and Tom Phillips. 3 of them are professional or recently professional, and they've been outstanding. They've decimated, attacks just for fun. I mean, going over some of the stats that we kindly get from the WIU with a bit more detail would be nice. We're talking, there's 3 Quins players in the top 5 for dominant tackles. You've got Lewis Millen and Sean Evans, who've got a combined 95 carries between them in the 3 games, which is, absolutely immense. And they're both around that 40% mark for, a dominant carry. I mean, the amount of ball they must be getting is, brilliant. I'm quite surprised they don't have anyone named in the turnover list, because I thought Sean Evans took about 20 himself in that Cardiff game. It just seems that they've developed a defensive system that is allowing them to work hard in attack. They had a debutant. Well, they had a couple of debutants actually. Johan Jones, another one from the Scarlets on the wing, who's come in, and they had Bowen Clark, who's from the youth side, came in late at 9 when Roger Lewis pulled out, and it just seems that they've got something going now. Ellis Price is firmly their number 10. Obviously, there was a lot of movement in that 10 shirt last season, so it seems as though he's been given a lot of confidence by being told, you are that number one. Obviously, you know, I have my concerns, especially with backups, etc., etc. You know, top point scorer so far. I think he's top on the accuracy now as well, which is brilliant to see. So all in all, I'm a very happy Quins fan, and knowing the likes of Ocean Williams and Gabriel McDonald are now back from, you know, being in that Scarlet's first team before the URC season kicks off, it's only going to get better for me, because I think in terms of their allocation, other than Sam O'Connor, who's now gone back, I can't see it changing that much during the season. And especially with the ideology that they have done there with Scott Snedden's influence, is he wants the boys playing rugby. So I think they're going to leave these boys there unless they have no choice, which is, you know, brilliant for that consistency and continuity. So on to our next game, and I was going to go and see about a little game that you like to talk about, but let's skip a little. Let's go from west to north. So Llandovery made the arduous trip up to RGC, and whilst they are now 3 from 3, they're still yet to record that first 6-pointer. So
they're not convincing yet, and I said I think Llandovery are putting one of their runs together, and this is the sort of thing I'm saying. You know, this wasn't a ground out win. This was done. I think the bonus point was up inside 25 minutes. This was a rapid escalation in the second half, which is a RGC pattern this season. Was where they started going, and all of a sudden you've got 72 points by 80 minutes. But from a Llandovery perspective, as you say, they've not kicked on. They're getting the bonus point of tries, but they're not keeping teams out, and that's their problem. Was it? You know, they've conceded well over 70 points the last couple of games. Newport got within a 7-pointer in round 1 on TV, which was actually a good game. So it's, if I was Uros Evans, that's my biggest work on at the moment. You're 3 from 3, 15 points on the board, second in the table. Ultimately, you know, that's not a bad run. You know, you've got a difficult place to go out the way in RGC. There's a long way to go, and we say it every week, but it is difficult because of that. But you've got to start managing your games, because better opponents, stronger opponents will start to bury the hatchet. And I want to see more of the game that we saw from them against Newport, which was managing certain aspects of the game. And even that game they didn't manage enough of. I think there's probably 40 minutes of that game they managed, you know, sort of successfully. But this is the sort of comparison we were saying last year for Newport, was Newport hadn't put together an 80-minute performance for the majority of the season. Across the regular season, there was only 1 or 2, but they put wins together, ultimately went on and won the league. And this is exactly the same. It's impressive us not being impressive, if that makes sense. And no one's talking about Llandovery as such. No one's saying, oh my God, have you seen that scoreline? You know, no one's talking about individual players as, you know, on top of that, because most of the stats, the top person is from another club, you know, and a variation of clubs. Then you've got someone like RGC, and the second half sort of revival is something we've seen a couple of times this year, even going back to pre-season when they played the likes of Coventry, and I know that was a sort of a 2-sided 40 minutes each, but they're letting sides get too far ahead, and then you're reeling them in. But you're reeling a side in, you need to score 3 times just to try and close a gap, if not 4 times, is too much. You're not gonna score 3 or 4 times without Llandovery replying, and then you're just playing tennis and going up in the scoreboard. So once again, they've had another 70-pointer up at RGC. They need to be working on those a bit, like I said earlier, for the Aberafan end game. Control the game. You stop it from going one end to the other. It's all good and well, say, oh, we'll score tries, that's how we win games. But you're not winning games. You know, they've won 1 game from 3 this season. They didn't win that many games last season. They were nearer the bottom than they were the top by far. So it's just those little margins. You've got to tidy things up. And yes, it's Llandovery, but ultimately, if they hadn't had let them pull away inside 25 minutes, you're looking fine. This is a competitive game for nearly an hour, which isn't a game of rugby. You need to play for 80 minutes, as we said about Swansea last season. But this is not a million miles away from clicking. 6 points, considering where they are this season, they're going to get a load of bonus points. But if they can just transfer those try-scoring games into wins, all of a sudden you fly up the table. You really do, because they score enough points that they would comfortably be probably 2 or 3 positions higher if they could just keep 10 to 15 points more out. And that's still in the mid-20s. I'm not asking them to concede 10 to 15 points a game here. I'm just saying don't let your opponent score more than 25 points. You're scoring enough. So it's the age-old adage. Your defense wins championships.
That's a very fair assessment. To be honest, it's quite curious that RGT's only win this season has obviously we're only 3 games in, so give it time. But 2 games at home and 2 losses, 1 game away, someone no one expected them to win, and they're going for a win. So it's quite curious how they're functioning at the minute. Again, on Llandovery not really sparking. 31-10 at halftime, so they lose the second half 21-10. And we made comments when the team sheet was announced, because it was basically a load of first and second year Scarlets Academy boys put on the bench. So and then a new signing in Tom Curry, but he's down as a hooker. So I don't know anything about this Tom Curry. I don't know if it's the same one that came from Quins, who was playing in the back row last season or whatever. But that is what it is. So they had Tom Phillips, Jack Pritchard, Tian Sparrow, and Steph Jack Jones, who were all in their second year of senior rugby. They had then Kai Jones and Griff Watkins, both first years. George McDonald, getting him confused with the what's it called, with the Quins boy. George McDonald obviously trained with the Scarlets over the summer. He's the only one that's really been consistent in this Drover squad. So is it essentially a brand new bench for the season? I mean, if you put all those names I've just given you, you wouldn't get double figures combined appearances from last season. So they've basically just chucked on a load of new boys on the bench and just see what happens. And it seems to be it didn't go as well as they would have probably wanted. But that's sort of the luxury Llandovery seem to have. They're able to chuck a load of young boys on because they can't put teams away inside that first 40 minutes. But
I guess this also works, right? Is obviously Euros wouldn't have been thinking that they're going to lose that second half with that bench, but we sort of saw that coming, right? I thought RGC's bench was the stronger, on paper. And I think sometimes it's not just as simple as you've got to use a development competition, but when you've got 8 Scarlets in your squad, and that's a deceptive term because that makes it sound as if you've got your first teamers, your parachute players, should we say? But in reality, it was 2 plus 6, and as you say, that's an empty of the bench, and all of a sudden you got boys coming on that are sub 21, and that just doesn't hack it. And I think that does show the level of quality that the SRC holds, is that you can't just chuck a good quality player but with no experience in and they'll do a job. But I think what that does show Llandovery is what they're doing. They're trying to build that depth quickly so that they're aware they haven't got the depth that they have in years gone by. They just haven't. We mentioned it a few times, of certain players retiring or moving on, etc. I don't think they're as strong in depth at the moment, but this is where they can try and get that. But it's how long do you do this, right? How long are you able to play 6 Scarlets age grade players before it turns around and bites you on the ass, and you either lose to a side because you're either not far enough ahead, there was a catastrophic flump. And one thing I will say is Euros Evans' second half management as good as he thinks or as good as he wants? Because you look back the last season, the semi-final was the last game that they played that season. No, let's look at Euros Evans' comments after that game. That they'd thrown it away. It was a disappointing second half. It was a really poor performance in the second 40. Now, I thought that was, wasn't telling the full story of how good a performance that was from Ebervale in that game and how that game actually went. And man marking one person changed that game completely. But that's a pattern that's gone from the tail end of one season into this season. They're not seeing games out, as in we're not closing games out and this is a rout. We're not getting the 6-pointers. They haven't got one of them yet, so they're not boosting on. That bench isn't adding anything. If anything, it's just holding steady or worse. And don't get me wrong, I know you can't do a great deal about the quality of age grade allocations, but it's one of those. Is that something that we're noticing from a Landavry perspective as a weakness? Because Euros himself admitted that the second half was poor from them last season. That's one thing that I'm picking up straight away this season.
Yeah, very fair, and we will see how it goes. I do have some comments come from you, Ross. It's not too much. It's not too much. Okay, so the game you have been waiting for.
Upper Swansea. Oh, wait, no, sorry.
So one of two 80-plus point games we had this past week. And I did actually call RGC Llandudno to be one of them, but no, they decided to tie in third on 72. Like, oh, terrible. So, Edu Vale against Cardiff. I mean, shipping 60 points against Cardiff. I mean, what were you doing like that?
Do you know what is one of those, right? Is to put this into perspective, people can say about Cardiff, etc., and who they're missing up front, but a bit of context around this is Ebervale's previous biggest win against Cardiff, margin-wise, was 41 points. Otherwise, it's never been more than 25 points. So that's a 40-point margin for the first time in 20 years. It's 20 years since that of the victory. So you can sort of work out what sort of Cardiff era that was, post-regionalisation. But the other thing is they never scored more than 49 points against Cardiff. It was one of those, you get to 45, and as any sort of supporter does, as long as there's time on the clock, we can get 50 by here, we can get the talk started going. You score that try, it was 48-20, you get a try, 53, conversion goes wide from out the touchline, and thinking, we're still playing here, we can get 60, and it was ironically, Evan Lloyd had missed every single kick he took at goal, except for the one to get him to 60. And this is what I mean. I said earlier about kickers, he was 90% accurate after the first two rounds. He was the highest accuracy from any kicker in the league, and he's down to like 64 or whatever it is now, even less than that. But Dorian Jones hadn't missed a kick all game. So obviously the bench were all trying to score out wide. But it was a really weird game, because you look at that and you think, they've just been annihilated. No, Cardiff were never in it. But it took 34 minutes. The game was 17-15 to Ebervale. It was a very scrappy affair, I'll be honest. For anybody watching would probably admit that. Early doors, both sides were looking good. They were getting over the ball, over the gain line, with the ball in hand. There wasn't that many knock-ons, but there was a bit of ill discipline, or things just weren't going quite right, and the turnovers were flying. You could see Cardiff get a try from the maul, and all of a sudden you're thinking, okay, the Cardiff maul is working today. That's an interesting one, because they're without Alan Rees at hooker. They're missing Craig Hood, the captain. They're missing Nathan Hood. They're missing Sean Moore. You're thinking, all right, I thought this Cardiff side were up for taking, according to the team sheet. Not the sort of the case, perhaps. And then Ebervale cut the ill discipline. They improved the accuracy in what they were doing. And once again, the rolling maul has provided 5 tries in this game for Ebervale. It's Joe Franchi gets the penalty try one comes in. Will Davis King gets sent to the bin. 2 quick tries at the end of the first half. And all of a sudden, I think everyone at that point was thinking that's game done. As long as Ebervale don't come out and do anything silly, that's game over. You're sort of thinking, can we hold out for a 6-pointer here? That's what you're thinking at that time, and that's the talk that was out there. other than the Pontypool score and the Newport score, of course. But then you come out the second half, Joe Franchi goes off, Ian Morris comes on and grabs a hat-trick, so he's now the SRC top try scorer. But it was just brutal. Like, the bench was emptied. When you've got the likes of Evan Lloyd, Dom Franchi, Sean Parry coming off the bench, and it was just like it was another gear. Everybody that was there, whether it was a forward just carrying up, it wasn't just carrying, hit the tackle, drop down and try and distribute. Everyone was making yards. Owen Conker must have made 100 yards that game. He was sitting deep and they were using him on the Cardiff exits to attack from deep and have that sort of gain line break to start them off. Everything was going right. Even the wingers were getting involved physically. It wasn't just chucking it out wide for width. And Cardiff were bullied. So, like I said, it's a thoroughly deserved result. And I know I said it on you. I think John predicted a 6-pointer to Ebervale. They were looking at it, and I think I said, listen, both of these sides are capable of doing a 6-point score on their day, but I just couldn't see it happening given the context of the two sides at the time. But it is one of the best performances in a long time from an Ebervale squad, and I mean, Cardiff got to be looking at depth and especially up front at the moment to try and resolve a lot of problems, because as I sort of said around Llandovery with their bench and the management of how you grow your depth, Cardiff have had 10 plus from academy or first team. Obviously only the one first teamer in Will Davis-King. But I've mentioned the four senior players out in that pack. Obviously the likes of Gwilym Bradley's not there. Mackenzie Martin's now at the Dragons. So you're thinking, all right, you've got Luca Stelarua is sort of still in there, but you've lost 6 potential forwards who were sort of in and out, and I know Bradley missed a lot last season, so you could argue 5 regulars, but they haven't recruited anybody. Like, I know they're the only side in the pathway for Cardiff rugby, and that ultimately means you're going to have a lot more academy support and first team support, but if you were at the stage where the first team can't give you anybody this early in the season, and you've got 4 injuries, which isn't the end of the world. I'll be honest, it's not. It's not unheard of for teams to be missing 4 players in a pack or back line. Then you got to look at your retention plan, but also your recruitment strategy. Like, they seem to be getting back 3 players in, back three, getting your backs in. But ultimately, you're missing players up front. Is Joe Goodchild had a really good game. I thought they finished superbly. The tries they did score, they were all good tries. The maul was solid. Goodchild, with a diving placement in both of the corners opposite each other. So there is positives out there, but I think for Cardiff, it definitely need to be looking at that wider squad strategy. But I think there is a bit of good news. It sounds like the Hudd brothers aren't too far away from coming back, so you may well see those on Saturday afternoon.
Oh, you've broken a little sort of surprise to give away later from Mr. Fish. But yeah, I totally agree with everything. I am concerned with Cardiff. Obviously, 60 points is bad, but Ebu Vale, consider the experience they are missing, and considering, Sean Moore and those 2 Hudd boys, plus the other losses they've taken, you bring those 3 boys back in, that's a hell of a lot of experience. Even though Lloyd Lucas is looking like he's going to be a solid 10, he doesn't have the experience of Harry Wild to, organise that, connect that defensive line between the backs and the forwards, etc., etc. So there is just so much missing from a top rags team, which is what we've been used to seeing so often. I mean, I don't think there's anything we can really add to Ebu Vale. 18 points out of a total 18 really destroyed everybody. I mean, how they are managing to get the depth that you do have, with the SRC rulings on players, on contracts, etc., which is actually somewhere you pointed out where Llandovery is actually struggling now. I think they've been absolutely amazing to manage it the way they are. Cardiff, oof, don't get me wrong, I love to see a Cardiff side lose personally, but I'm kind of hoping to see Vale pick up a loss pretty soon. Yeah, it would be nice. I mean, I know one of the two undefeated teams will take a loss in the next fortnight, regardless of what happens this weekend. But Jesus, I can't believe how good Vale are looking, and I can't believe how fragile Cardiff are. I mean, they've conceded over 120 points in 3 matches. I know half of them have come against in one game, but you're still talking 31 is the lowest they've conceded, which
Yeah,
must be a big worry.
Well, that's just it. I mean, we talk about different teams with a poor recruitment plan. I think we looked at Ebervale last season, and I don't think it was a one-trick pony, but you could see they were struggling at times with depth in the backs and a bit of back three pace. And now you look at Stav Thomas out on the wing. I know Ewan Bowden was there last season, sorry. But Dav is looking really good. He's looking rapid with ball in hand. He's extremely physical. The amount of times he was just taking it deep and he wasn't chipping over the top. He was running it hard. And I mean, the bank was going oof, as he hit the contact. There was two players having to tackle him. He's not a small boy. If you ever met him, he's a big lump. He's stacked. And that's just adding what you need. Dorian Jones started the game. Again, they didn't have 10 cover last season. They signed Josh Malson from Newbridge. He ended up not playing with Ebervale for basically all of the season. He didn't play a regular season game or cup. So they only had Evan Lloyd, who ended up fracturing his bloody eye socket towards the end of the season and played the final a week after seeing the bloody specialist sort of thing. So it's having that depth, and Dorian just ran the show. He made the first try. If you've seen the highlights, he goes to throw the pass. It's a dummy, splits the line, dog leg, straight through. Ethan Phillips gets the score. He's kicked a touch, best part of 60 metres, makes it up for the maul for the second try. So it's all these sort of little things you're just building up. We get to see Morgan Rees, who was the travelling reserve when the Lions played the Reds over the summer. He had to be pulled late due to what sounds like a hamstring injury at the moment. But I think it's one of those, if you can get him fit, he's a very fast boy. Swansea fans will know him. He's played with them before going down south. So they've come in, and Jason Strange has worked very, very hard to sort of pick out these little areas. I think the only place they're not struggling at the moment, but the depth that they would have liked to have a bit more, is scrum half. But you look at Rory Harries, the amount of passes is third. The accuracy again is north of 85%, which is fantastic. There's the top five are all 85 to 90% in the league. And you've got somebody like Griff Tuff is back training, and he's not looking a million miles off. John Evans is taking up his coaching role at the moment, as well as trying to get back fit for sort of the New Year sort of period. So you've got all of this depth is building and smartly being done. So you've got to make hay whilst the sun shines in the SRC. You can't rest on laurels and you think, we've beaten Cardiff, didn't get a bonus point, and we didn't beat them by 15 for the other bonus point, but we beat them. No, 9 tries. It's a fucking rout. It is. The Cardiff boys looked out of it, dejected, and that's got to change, right? You've got a week to turn it round, and no doubt that the scoreline, even if it is another loss, is going to be a lot closer. But yeah, as you say, from an Ebervale perspective, 18 points out of 18, unbeaten at the top of the league with Landovery sitting close behind, is nigh on dreamland at the moment. I mean, it's a long season. You don't win the league after 3 games, but you can certainly lose it, I think. And you've also got to remember, and this sounds ridiculous really, given that the only home game they lost last year was the final, but if you can get the quarter-final, semi-final, and possibly final at home, it benefits you, and it benefits the club, because that Newport Ebervale game is worth more than 50,000 quid to the club. You know what I mean? That is the equivalent of what the WRU grant was 2 years ago in the Premiership. You know what I mean? That's that sort of. It's not just the advantage you should be getting on field. It's the money behind the bar. They don't have to share the gate with the opposition or anything like that. It's that sort of positive feel on the community, but also the cash inflow. So it's all of these things that people at Landovery as well are starting to think about closing games out. Give yourself as big an advantage as you can come April, May.
Exactly. So that does bring us to our final game of the round, and one that we were all really fighting hard with to predict which way it was going to go. And inevitably, we all went for a home win for Newport against Swansea. And I believe we were all around under the same comment. If it was at St. Helens, I think that would be enough to give Swansea, to make us back Swansea. And it turns out they must have all listened to this podcast on the bus down, and they've come out and just put Newport down. I mean, 42-40 is immense. It must have been an incredible game to watch. Again, we're talking, I don't even know, like well north of 300 points from 5 games this week is something defense coaches will be having nightmares about for probably the rest of the season, no doubt. But damn, this is such a different Swansea side to what we saw last season. 7 tries to 6. I mean, they did need all them tries because for some reason Josh Phillips' radar had just abandoned him completely. I think he only managed 2 or 3 of his, kicks at goal out of all of them. But I'm just shell shocked at Newport.
Yeah.
You're champions. You literally you went away to the toughest place in the league, like you recently just said, won the whole damn thing. You've started the season with 3 losses, 2 of them at home.
Yeah.
What is going on?
Well, that's just it. They're the only team left now without a win in the entire league. They're 9th in the league with 5 points. It's the worst possible start for a title defence. But as you say, you got to look at these home games, right? 2 of these are at home. You only get 9 home games, so you already dropped 2 of them. You've still got the likes of, Pontypool down at Newport. Vale have got to go to Newport. Quins will go. All of these sort of games are still going to be coming at you as well. So I talked about making hay whilst the sun shines, and how, yes, you don't win the league within the first 3 rounds or if you get 3 wins, but you can very much lose it, because what you don't want to be doing is having to go away in a quarter-final game. And that's something that is extremely feasible here for Newport, is they're going to have to go on the road in a quarter-final game. I mean, obviously, they would have to go through a repechage effectively if they stayed where they are, which adds even more to it. But they've had some good drop downs. Di Richards has played superbly well at the weekend, and he's dropped down well. Jack Lloyd's dropped down, hasn't shown that the form he did at the end of last season, was playing well. Jordan Morris has got involved the last couple of games. Matt O'Brien's been back and forth, obviously, whilst doing his Dragons coaching. So they've not got a bad squad. They've badly missed Ben Roach, a bit of leadership and guidance, I think. They're sort of unsettled them, perhaps. They haven't got the leaders up front that they maybe had a couple of years ago. They're playing with some youngsters throughout the side, and I think 9 is a contentious area at the moment in terms of quality. I think Morgan Williams has been an absolute fantastic signing for them, but I think they're switching everybody around again at the moment. They don't know. Jack Lloyd's played at centre, Di Richards has played at centre and fullback, Carwyn Penny's played at fullback and fly half. Everybody's like, hang on, how do I fit everybody in here? And that's Ty's biggest sort of problem. And you can sort of see it, that they're not a cohesive unit. They've got the quality to finish teams. Di Richards made so many points on his own, and there were some fantastic tries in this one, but some simple things that they looked a bit lost at times, and then threw a big interception to Matthew Aubrey, and I'm looking at it going, what are they doing there? They're throwing a big looping pass. They've missed the man. There's only the winger out there, so they're not going to advance upfield in that sort of play. Aubrey runs 60 metres and scores an interception try. And then you think they finally win the game. They get the try. They're 40-39 up late on, basically that is it. And again, another game of ping pong. They just couldn't keep Swansea back. And as I sort of said with Evan Lloyd, missed kicks all game, hit the one for the 60, a little less important than this one. But Josh Phillips has been missing them left, right, and centre. I would say a regulation kick. If anybody watched the Cardiff Quins game on TV the other week, it was a very similar position penalty to the one that won the game for Quins. It was that sort of angle on the left-hand side of the post, roughly the same sort of distance out, right through the middle, and deservedly take the points. And we sort of said it a lot for Swansea last year. We didn't really know where they were sitting. They were sort of close, 60 minutes, 70 minutes, 75-minute performances. Couldn't quite close them out. Beat Aberavon 10-0 at Christmas, and one was a half a dozen games across all competitions between January and sort of May. And whilst they've only won 1 out of 3 so far, but they're sitting 6 in the table, 7 points after 3 games. And they've beaten Newport. Yes, you've still got to defend, Broadacre, because obviously they're playing against Dunvant, playing out of Dunvant on Thursday night. Obviously, the TV game this week which we'll get on to in a minute. But yeah, I like the look of this Swansea side, and I guess that big fullback that John mentioned last week, which is obviously the title name, Lewis Edwards, which is the Swansea fullback, had another barnstorming game. He's looking really good.
Yeah, I do have to agree with you on that. And John was very right to point him out. He has been rather impressive. So we've taken a bit of time on these games so far. So I think we should cut last week's action dead right there and move on. So if you've made it this far, please like, share, subscribe, comment, press some hype button that apparently exists on YouTube if you're watching via that medium. And as always, a nice little thank you for listening in. Okay, that brings us on to this coming week. I'm yet to see the Swansea team be named for tomorrow. So, let's give them a few more minutes and see if they're willing to play ball with us. So, we'll basically trace over where we went. So, Bridgend are now travelling to Aberavon. So, oh Christ, I didn't realize how much he wrote. So comments from Scott Baldwin. Great game for the neutral, I'm sure. He was very disappointed with some of the tries conceded. Went into the game looking to target the scrum. Really didn't control the areas that we wanted to and show the right pictures towards the ref. He makes a comment, like most outside of the front row, a very limited understanding of the scrums, which is true. At least he's accepting that. Gave him too many easy entries and piggybacked them up the pitch. Their ill discipline been an issue across all games. Something that we are reviewing as coaches. Lineout was inconsistent, especially first half. Didn't reward ourselves from the opportunities we were creating. Maul was a lot better, but probably overcommitted at times, which obviously exposed us elsewhere. And Aberavon exploited us well, but still there's some improvement there for us. Thought we looked lethal when we managed to get clean ball off set piece and release our backs, create those one-on-ones. Laura we're doing is in a really good place. League is competitive this year, and the need to stay under 10 defensive penalties is huge. You're always going to give some away, but at the moment we're conceding avoidable ones, needless penalties that just release the pressure on the opposition while turning it back onto us. Reviewing us, the habits that we need to change, and that's what we're focusing on going to Aberavon next week. So wow, I didn't actually realize he'd written that much. He normally gives a voice note and I condense it, but there we go. Thanking you, Mr. Baldwin, for your kind comments regarding the game. He's very clear in what he's seeing and what he wants to see, and how he's going about changing that. So I don't know how to feel again about Bridgend. I do think you were right. They're probably a bit lucky to have got the win against Quins. They could be easily standing here being 0 from 3. But yeah, they do still have a lot of talent. I do think they've recruited well over the summer, especially in that front row in the pack. It's just, it seems that that ill discipline is the big key for them at the minute.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if they can turn that around in 1 week, especially going to tag. Obviously, home crowd they matter so much. I mean, I do think you're probably looking at a 2-score advantage when you're at home games. I think you're probably starting at +10, +12. In majority of home games you have, and I do think that's going to be the case for Abraham to tag. So you're asking Bridgend really to improve by 2 scores, and I don't think they're going to be able to do that in a week.
No, and I think the interesting one there is he's mentioned that going sub 10 penalties in a game is the aim. I sort of spoke last season around Scott saying that silverware was the aim, and whether as a young coach he's got to learn to be a bit more realistic. To put sub 10 penalties into perspective, a professional side at club level will be looking at sub 10, and test match rugby you're looking somewhere 4 to 6. That's where you want to be looking. So realistically, here he's looking for a number that a professional side, and you can see that's where his brain is coming from, because he's thinking about where he's been before and test and a lion, etc., and all of that. But you do wonder, and you've hit the nail on the head. How do you turn it around in 1 week? He wants sub 10 penalties. So say 10 penalties he'd be happy with in a game. They've given away more than 10 penalties in the third quarter alone, the last 2 games. And that's at home. Aberravon are a good side. They've already knocked Newport off at the Talbot Athletic Grounds. They got a good pack forming. They're building a bit of momentum. They'll be buoyed by last week. I think they lost all the games against Bridge last year. So this is a big turning point. They've got it round. And this is the best position to be in. Travel away in the first game, win, and have the home game second, where you're looking for the double. And yeah, I think this is one. I don't think it'll be a 6-point. I don't think Aberravon are quite that tidy at the moment. And I can see Bridgend tidying up their ill discipline, their penalty count. But I can see this, as you say, being more than 7 points in favour of Aberravon.
Yeah, and I'm quite sure that John is going to be right there agreeing with us. Always Aberravon for him. Next game, we have the reverse. Carmarthen Quins travelling to Pontypool. Steph Thomas delighted to get the win on the weekend. Boys were disciplined and clinical in the first half, getting that 24-0 lead against the wind. There was a reaction from Pooler. We dealt with it, but we were disappointed not to get the 4th try. The double-header is a challenge, and we'll need to make a few tweaks for this week's game. But, we head to Pooler fully expecting a huge battle, but one we are very, very excited for. So he's touched on not getting that 4th try in the second half. Dealt with the reaction from Pontypool. Well, they still won the game. They'd only conceded the 1 try and up until the clock hit the red. So I'm not getting anything too major out of that, other than the fact of when they turn it on, and that is it's good to see in terms of the league and the style of play it's creating. I mean, like I said, so many points, so many points. But it's a difficult, and I do wish I could have got Tom Hancock to give us level, but I think he shut up shop. He wants to get things sorted, which I would myself. I'd want to blank everything out and just focus on getting my team back to normal, especially taking the losses that they have.
Yeah.
If RGC hadn't beaten Pontypool at Pontypool Park 2 weeks ago, I would be back in Pooler 100% at home. Like you said, they were undefeated there last season. But Quins have shown they can take care of them. Quins have shown in 40 minutes they can take care of them. Similar style pitches, obviously. Neither play on that fully artificial turf. So there's not going to be a great deal of change for them other than that travel. And I'd like to think that that'll be enough. That's not enough of a difference maker for for Quins to lose. When I talk about that, that plus those 2 scores that a home advantage gives you, I think we are looking at probably a 3-point game, if that. It's either going to be incredibly tight or we're going to see Quins, one of the teams, fold.
Yeah, I think there's 2 key areas in this, and you've sort of touched on it already, where Steph doesn't mention major changes. I think they want to control the game, see it out, and just have that bit of composure and how they manage a game, because you have to do that against quality sides or places that are difficult to play. You can't just go out and expect to rack up your bonus point or 24 points in the first half. But also as the scrum, that's where RGC took the game from Pontypool. They got penalties against the head. They were stealing lineouts as well. So Quins will be up for this. Fawcett's in some fantastic form. Got a couple of tries. He's going to be excited. Target the set piece, and you'll have a platform to build from, and you remove Pontypools. Like I said, the pitch is even for both. Quins have got a bit of momentum after they lost their game in round 1. So they won a couple of games now. They're bouncing on. Pooler sitting at the bottom under a bit of pressure now. They're trying to sort things out. I don't think Tall Hancock's still got his starting 15 nailed down, especially in that front row. And that's where this is going to be. I think it'll be close. I do think you are right that RGC result against Pontypool has changed this. But I've got confidence here that Carmarthen Quins are going to take this one.
Oh, boom. I like to hear that, even if it does mean we're all,
Well, let's just say that John's gone Pontypool.
Yeah.
John's going with all the home sides this week. Aberravon at home. That's what we'll do.
Aberravon at home. That's what we'll do. It is what.
Yeah, he'll have all the home sides. He likes an upset, and he likes to throw it around.
Happiness. So that takes us on to Llandovery. Going back home against RGC. So nice short one by you from Euros. Great win for us in what is always a tough place to go. Delighted that we managed to give some game time to all our young academy players. RGC finished strong on the weekend, and it shows that we need to maintain our high standards if we're going to get the results next week. I asked him about the squad, considering the sheer amount of Scarlets they did have. He said they're looking at the same allocation of players coming to them. They're probably looking at a few rotations, nothing major within their squad. Watch him pull out and just go as strong as he possibly can now and just really stick me in the back with that one. But yeah, it's hard not to fancy Llandovery at home against anyone except Ebbw Vale, and even then, it's a tough one. So I can't see RGC doing enough coming down and beating, Llandovery. I do expect probably a couple more changes, especially on our bench, whether or not they put some of those young boys as starting, just to sort of negate the big drop off in the second half. But Llandovery have got to get a 6-pointer at some point, and I think it could well be this week.
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement there. I think that's not a bad strategy either, is get a few strong finishers on the bench. It sounds like that's what he might do. Use that home advantage as your sort of your mitigation against starting a few weaker players, less experienced players. Have a stronger finish, which is when RGC have been typically stronger this season. I just think this is the moment that you see Llandovery just kicking a bit, and it wouldn't surprise me to see this finish, with a very wide gap. I think this is going to be the 6-pointer, and we agree with John on this. Llandovery win.
Ooh, another 3-way. So we now go to the game that you love the most. And a few words, okay, more than a few words, actually, from Mr. Dan Fish. Let's see if I can rattle them down. Very disappointed to fold like we did in the second half. 36 minutes in, we were only losing 17-15 into the wind. Couple of unforced errors, and Ebbw were very clinical and got 2 tries in 4 minutes to take 31-15 to the half. You've obviously mentioned this already. Second half, we didn't come out of the changing rooms, and Ebbw just dominated everything. We know what to expect from them, but stopping them is a complete other thing. And, if you're giving them opportunities, that they're going to come away with points. Back at the Arms Park this weekend, we've got to put some pride back into the jersey. I've been involved with Cardiff for the last 16 seasons, and I've never felt the way I did on Saturday. And it hurts, not just me, but the whole coaching group, the whole playing group. We are hurting, and we need a reaction, and we have to physically step up on Saturday. If we can look after the ball in the contact area, we know we can cause all teams problems. But we have to have that edge come Saturday, because if we don't, we know what's coming. So he's being rather ominous with there, that if they don't get their ducks in a row, it's going to be another hammering. So I asked for a bit of early team news, any news on the likes of Shomo and the Hud boys, and he just replied with Thursday 8 p.m. and a wink. So I'm expecting this squad to be named at 8 p.m. tomorrow, and we're going to see a few names returning. And if not, another person has stabbed me in the back. They're setting me up to fail. I think they've all gathered round and
I'd already messaged him.
So I want Cardiff to win. I'm really sorry, but I want Ebbw Vale to have that loss. If Llandovery had gone 18 from 18, same, I was probably thinking it'd do the league some good for them to have a loss, but they're not quite showing that dominance yet. If it comes at all, actually, we need to be wary that is a possibility. But I so want Ebbw. I so want this league to really be ultra competitive, like we're seeing. So if one team that hasn't won a game, two teams that haven't lost, that 70% in the middle. It's looking so sweet this season, and given the results, we don't know where anything is going, but it's so hard not to back Ebbw Vale, and I'm bugger it. All home. Gotta go all home. Now, not all home, because obviously Carmarthen Quins are going to Pontypool, but I'm going to go home for a fair with them. So I want to say Cardiff. I really got to say Cardiff out of blind hope more than anything.
No, I think that is the key point there. Is he's mentioned there's a few names expected back. I've already mentioned the Hud brothers. And that makes a difference. That's the experience. That's your maul. Both your defense and your setup. It all improves vastly. All of a sudden, that's a big improvement. The problem Cardiff have got is you've got to close a 40-point gap just to get it back to level pegging, right? So I just think at the moment, whilst the back line is set up very well, even with those boys coming back, are they bringing them back a week too soon? Be in reaction? Now, don't get me wrong, I found out that the Head boys are likely to come back on Saturday evening. So I don't think it's entirely reactionary to the result and performance, but that's always an interesting one, to see who comes back. I think where I'm going this, Matt. It's going to be 4 out of 4.
It is just going to be 4 out of 4, but is it going to be 24 out of 24? That's the call you need to make right now.
Well, I'm going to say yes, because I'm going down on Saturday to watch it. So.
Oh, no way. An away game? Wow.
Yes.
Well, I'm assuming you're walking, because there's no chance you're getting a train down there.
You've just nailed it on the head. I'm going to take my unicycle out the shed and make my way down.
Happy days. I wonder why they called him the clown. So that brings us, let's see, who have we done? We've done Abraham Virgenda. Oh, I think we're on to the TV game. So Thursday night TV game. Let's have one last look in. Again, some more blind hope. Come on, Swansea. Please, what is it? It's 21-18 on the Wednesday. Your game will be surely coming to a close at this point in 24 hours. We need that team sheet. And we are not getting it. So I'm going to assume they're going to be sticking to more or less the same as what they have done. These past 3 games, there hasn't been, major personnel changes. There's been a lot of movement between, the bench and the first team and positions. But other than that, I think, they've got it nailed on the head. I mean, again, their recruitment has looked pretty good. I think Rodri King coming in as that second hooker has, really, really improved them, which, I wouldn't have expected, just that one personnel, but there to have that much of a difference. But it seems the mall, with him is working a lot better. I want Newport to win this again. Get out everyone on the win. But it's really hard to see, especially seeing as Newport have named their side, and quite frankly, if I'm comparing, last week's 23 to this week's 23, and I'm thinking whilst there's probably a bit more experience at 10, it looks weaker to be honest. They've what was it, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 new faces in the 23. Obviously most of them are on the bench, but you've got people appearing for the first time this season in Iron Jenkins, Logan Franklin on the bench. You've then got this new young boy starting at 6. I'm going to struggle to pronounce this name. It's like Tiehi Chatham or Chatham. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. I'm sure that we'll find out on Thursday night with the pronunciations of the commentators. But I don't like the 10, 12, 15 combination of O'Brien, Lloyd, and Penny in that order. I don't think it works too well. They tried it a few times last season, and they went away from it. Obviously, there is the issue with Matt O'Brien being with the Dragons, but you've got to be looking to build in continuity, build in your combinations, and facts are, but Jack Lloyd is going to be 10 majority of the season. So why are you messing with it now? I mean, have Matt on the bench by all means, but I don't see why you want to mess with your 10 and centers. And it seems to be what's going on. I do have some words from Ty if I didn't drop my phone. Apologies, everybody. So let's try and find Ty. There we go. Yeah. Oh, nice short one. Haven't had the start we hoped for. Last week's game against Swansea summed that up. Mix of good, mix of bad, and ugly moments. Looking forward to getting back on the horse and back in front of the TV cameras. So, nice and short from Ty. Makes a change. But I don't know how you were thinking about this. I want Newport to win for that. Get everybody on the board. But really, Swansea are looking really good, and being back home, it's hard to see.
Yeah, I think the only thing is out of Dunvant rather than St. Helens. That makes a little bit of a difference. And I do think you're right. Jack Lloyd at 12 hasn't worked this season. It didn't work last season. They went away from it, as you say. Is it that I don't want to quite say blind loyalty to Obi, but you've got to know the time to move someone on. I don't. He's so back and forth with it. Even he admitted after the final that he didn't play well, and he's probably just not in that 100% space with it at the moment. So it's a bit of a mismatch team. I think they've gone for a very dynamic pack, but it lacks leaders. You've sort of got your Henry Palmer at hooker, Josh Skinner in your second row, Josh Reed in the back row, but there's a lot of youngsters in there as well. 3 from the Dragons in the starting pack, a lot of youngsters. And you look at the bench and you're sort of going, where's that impact coming from? They haven't had those players making impacts. Callum Bradley's not at the heights that he did at sort of Merthyr, and Ollie Drake's not got going there. Tom Workman. Johnny Morris off the bench is probably the only one of that bench that's playing well this season. But again, you got someone like him playing well. Morgan Williams and Finn Baker are finishing well, but I think Morgan Williams plays better at 15. So why not start Johnny Morris, Finn Baker, and Morgan Williams as your back 3? You've got Jack Lloyd goes to 10. Di Richards is already at 13. You just need to find yourself a 12. But, and I know it's difficult to say because sometimes it's more difficult to make a prediction seeing one team than another. But I got a feeling about Newport with this one. I know that goes against everything I've just covered, basically. But I just got a feeling that Newport will get off the mark, which, as you say, is fantastic. To have all 10 teams with at least one win after 4 rounds would be immaculate. when the quickest you can do it, if the fixtures give, would be 2 anyway. So it's, it is just ridiculous how competitive the league is this year, and the prediction league that we're doing is so much harder. But I'm feeling another close game. I think this is within 7 points again, and they're going to be a good TV game. But I think it is another one that just goes Newport's way.
Oh, so did John actually give us his predictions, or are we just doing it?
No, I've just said he's going everybody at home.
Everybody at home. Okay, that's fair. That's fair. So that means he's gone Swansea. So I have to swing this one way or the other, and it is. Well, I've probably already said Swansea, but there we go. So that's a nice 2-1. So we got did we have a couple of them? I think we might have had 1 or 2. So
couple.
Not a bad week for the predictions. I do have to let you know that you have taken a slight lead after last week. You are now 1 ahead. Don't get cocky.
God.
Hey, 10 from 15 isn't the best.
10 from 66%, Mark. The bookies will be worried. That's why John's not here. The bookies are fucking running. Worrying. Dragon Bet are going to start employing me as a full-time, expert now.
But yeah, 66%. That's a good return. I mean, I think they'd be happy with that, as long as you don't give too many long odds to your 5. But there we go. Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining me. As always, Rob, it's a pleasure to hear some of the profanities come out of your mouth, as always.
Pleasure's all yours, sir.
You cheeky boy. There we go. Thank everyone for listening. We will do it all again next week once the double headers are over. And just a little bit of a preview. Ebbw Vale v Llandovery is the TV game we're covering next week. That's going to be explosive.
Tasty.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, whatever one it is. We'll see you next week. Super. Sorry, John.
That was the Super Rugby Cymru podcast. Please rate, review and share us on socials if you can, and join us again next week for more of the same. And until then, enjoy your rugby.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.